This is Van Electric Ghost. We're live on the air with Russell Van Brocklen for the first time. We're going to talk about dyslexic kids and how they're specialists, not generalists. And I just want to thank you for being on the show today on a Saturday morning. But before we get to the heart of your story, I always ask every guest a couple questions. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, to be honest with you, what happened with me is it all started in the late 90s when I was finishing up college and I wanted to know how laws were created, not some class I wanted to know. So I did this ridiculous thing. I signed up for the New York State Assembly internship program. And the reason why it was ridiculous is I showed up and I said, here's my neuropsychological evaluation. I have a first grade reading and writing level. So the speaker's office decided to accommodate the living daylights out of me to the absolute extreme. They didn't care about the cost, and it ended up costing them thousands. It worked out really well. I ended up getting a recommendation of 15 credits of A minus. So that goes back to the research to the political science department of the State University of New York Center at Buffalo. They didn't like the extreme accommodation, so they lowered my grade from 15 credits of A minus to 15 credits of F. They flunked me. So at that point, I said, how do I go and force myself to learn to read and write so I can teach other dyslexics in grad school? And my professor said, well, if you like politics, it's easy, law school. So I went to audit 2 law school classes with the inability to read or write. I kind of forced myself to learn to read a bit. Second day of contracts, the professor called on me, and I didn't respond as a student. I responded as his equal, because typically they use the Socratic method. You don't know the answer. Nobody does the first week. They keep asking you questions until you eventually, they embarrass you publicly until you eventually adapt. He asked me questions. I responded. Then I started attacking him, which he looked kind of, what the heck? We go back and forth, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He throws up his hand and said, Russell, you couldn't be any more correct. In the interest of time, I need to move on to the next case. I learned to read within a month. I learned to write within a couple of years. Then I go back to the New York State Senate, and I said, I want you to fund my dyslexia research program. I solved dyslexia. And they said, well, we don't really do that, but they sent me over to the New York State Education Department. And after going through things for years, I got approval for a multi-year study at the Averill Park Central School District right outside of Albany, New York, our state capital. And what we did is I focused on extremely motivated high school juniors and seniors. They were highly intelligent, college bound. They had middle school writing skills. 1 class period a day for the school year. They increased their writing to the average range of entering graduate students on the GRE writing assessment. They all went on to college, GPAs of 2.5 to 3.6. We were 3 times more successful than the best dyslexic transfer college at the time for less than 1% of the cost. I was under $900. They were over $100K. And that's how I got started.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's interesting when I talk to creative people. There are a lot of creative people I've talked to. I talked to tons of artists, and they tend to be neurodivergent. And what I find is like people are kind of told to fit into the box, but then people want people to be coming out with out of the box thinking, and they tell them to sit in the cube all day. You know, it's like so how you like okay, you say you want the out of the box thinking, but you really don't support it. Like you said, the people were like not supportive. You had to find your own way by using your mind and your creativity to kind of work around the structure, which, you know, to me is fantastic because that's what people have to do. But like your fact that you figured out a way, then you're like a mentor. You want to pay it forward. You want to help other people. You don't want to be like some folks today are like, I got mine, you get yours. I'm not going to help you. They pull the ladder away and they don't even want to assist. So I think like what made you feel like you wanted to help others? Because you felt that was like something that you were empathetic toward other people, not just yourself.
Well, I mean, I was just completely angry with the entire system. Remember what happened? The Speaker's office of the New York State Assembly came up with these insane accommodations, and some professors at a state university decided because they didn't like those accommodations, here's your 15 credits of F. That was 29 years ago. That's still on my transcript. I said, I'm done with this. Just so you know what's going on. This is, there's can't turn off the background. All right. Well,
it's like interfering.
yeah, I can't do it. So what's going on is there's a book called Overcoming Dyslexia by Dr. Sally Shaywitz. And what's going on is the back part of the dyslexic brain has like nothing going on. The back part of a typical brain is going crazy. But the front part of the brain is about 2.5 times overactive compared to a gen ed brain. That's your creative part. This is like the grad school sauce. Right. So what I want to do is actually walk your people through how to be creative. And this also works for, just so you know, the most advanced case I'm working on as far as kids are concerned. His name is Grayson. He's not dyslexic in the least. He's just your 99th percentile kid in math, 99th percentile in science. He wants to get his PhD to work for NASA to terraform Mars. So we have to get him published in one of the major terraforming Mars journals. I found one. I found out what needs to get done. Grayson's currently being taught through the process I'm about to explain to you by his father. Then we need to get him to go through a book called The Craft of Research, which came out in 95, teaches PhDs how to do their doctoral dissertation, context, unique problem statement solution, sold over 1 million copies in the last 31 years. You got to show them how to do that, write up an article, get it submitted, get it past a desk acceptance, and then rejected by a peer reviewer, which it will be. If you miss a comma, you'll miss it. Then we're going to hook him up with a professor who he'll then explain, I want you to help me finish up with this so I can, get published and go to my doctoral program. How old do you think Grayson is?
Or are you like under 20?
Grayson's 10.
Wow.
Okay.
I figured they were under 20, but I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the thing that you need to understand about Grace is we literally go the entire way. And again, he's not dyslexic in the least. This works for everybody. So you mentioned that you work with a lot of very creative people who are learning diverse. So what is the thing about them that you admire the most in regards to their creative ability, so I can show you how to kind of replicate that?
Well, I think what I like about the people I deal with are people that don't want to just clone and copy. Mm-hmm. They're willing to give of themselves. They're willing to be very experimental. They're willing to be vulnerable. And I think there's a lot of people who are scared of that because, the normal human tendency is to stay safe. And to stay safe means that you just replicate what everybody already knows. As soon as you try something different, the haters come in and say they don't like it. Everybody says that's not part of the canon. That's not part of what we know. And it takes some courage to actually go and take what's inside and put it out in the ether. Not everybody's willing to do that.
All right. So the question is, how do we come up with that something different? All right. So what I'd like to do is actually show you a process for how to do that. And this is something that this is for everybody out there. This does work for non-dyslexics or non-ADD or ADHD people. I'm just going to let you know that the dyslexics have 2.5 times the neural activity in the front part of the brain. So now you're playing in my sandbox. You had the advantage going through general school. We have the advantage out of school. So let's kind of go through that. What I found is when we're trying to come up with a creative idea, a lot of times we can actually go ahead and come up with something interesting to develop those ideas, but we need a framework. We need some way to help organize our thinking and to kind of express things. So what we typically do is I usually start off with a movie review. Okay. So let's start off with, I need you to tell me a movie that meets 3 criteria. Number 1, it's a movie that you know extremely well. Number 2, you think it's one of the best of all times. And number 3, everybody has seen it. All right. What's the name of that movie?
Well, for me, I'm kind of biased to Citizen Kane, but probably not everybody's seen it.
Nope, that's absolutely fine. Citizen Kane is considered by many film historians as being the finest movie ever made. So now I'm going to ask you a very hard question. I need you to reduce Citizen Kane to a one-word universal theme that best represents that movie in your own unique viewpoint.
Like you're just a one statement,
No, a one-word universal
one
theme.
word.
That best represents that is unique to your point of view.
It's unconventional.
Not unconventional. I'm looking for something about the movie itself, not how it was shot.
Oh, I think it's it was very experimental.
Yes, but that's what everybody says about it. I'm looking for something unique to your view.
To my view. Well, it's I have a hard time doing it in one word.
I know this is not designed to be easy. This is to bring you down a pathway so that we can be much more creative.
I don't know. I can't think of it right now.
Okay. You see how difficult this is?
Yep.
Okay. So if I were to ask a person who's dyslexic into films, how long do you think it would take them to come up with something good?
Well, but given what you said about their brain activity, they probably do it a lot faster than I did.
Yeah, they would do it in a matter of moments. Okay. There are advantage to being dyslexic. Okay. So what we would do is let's just take your idea for experimental. Okay. We would write a movie review on how the actors, the director, and the person who wrote the movie, how they did with the universal theme of experimental. Okay. Do you see how that's not really going to work?
Yeah, it's probably, I don't know, it's not specific enough.
It's just, yeah, it just doesn't fit. So let's kind of go into Citizen Kane for a moment. So normally what we have are the standard who, what, when, where, how, why questions. So I want you to think about the movie. Name a minor character that you think is important who had an interesting storyline that is the most interesting to you. Not the main one, it's a minor one.
That would probably be hard to get that one because that's probably difficult. But let me see something. Yeah, I don't know. To think about it. I think.
Okay. Is this a movie that you know really well?
Well, I mean, I know I can't remember like all the minor characters. I know the general themes, but
okay. So generally, again, I'm just trying to demonstrate how hard this is. So I tend to go with the minor characters because the main ones everybody's done before. But let's
Agnes Moorehead as Mary Kane, maybe.
Okay.
She's only in like one sequence.
Okay. And what's the best universal theme that represents that character in your point of view?
Well, the universal theme. Well, she's a mother, and there's a concept of like, she's kind of like agonizing why she sent Charles away.
Okay, reduce that to one word.
Betrayal.
Betrayal. Okay. So what we've now done is, do you see how going for something specific, asking a specific question, makes it a lot easier to come up with that universal theme?
Yeah, it's kind of what writers do with like film directors when they're trying to figure out like the motivation for the actor in the scene.
Right. So if we were to do a movie review, we'd ask how do the actors do, the directors do, and the screenwriter, and then we would do it that way. The problem with what we came up with here is a very broad brush.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. which used to work great in creativity, back in the 90s. But in the 2020s, we want to be much more specific. So then we said, now that we understand the need for a universal theme, how do we structure this? How do we structure our thought process to try to come up with something much more specific so that we can just get over this creative hump? And then I'm going to use a framework that I found out in high school called Any Shakespeare Play You've Ever Read.
Hmm.
All right. So I want you to think back to high school, any Shakespeare play. You'd have a hero. The hero would want to do something based on one or more universal themes. Then there would be an ultimate villain who is a character combined with some concepts and some universal themes, who would then try to prevent the hero from accomplishing their goal. They would have conflict in Act 1, go crazy in Act 2, and escalation resolve in Act 3. Sound familiar?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of structured.
Okay. All right. So now to expand on the creative process, what we're going to do is I'm going to tell this to you as an adult, not to some kid in school, because the kids do this manually, and I'm going to show adults how to use artificial intelligence with this. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people tell me they use ChatGPT. So I'm going to tell you, spend the $20 a month. It's $5 a week. It's worth it. Go on, the current best model is 5.5, put it on thinking, and then on the right-hand side, click on that, go to configure, and put it on extended thinking. I used to spend $200 a month on ChatGPT. When the Pro plan came out, I bought it that day. We dropped to $20 a month because I can still get 10 minutes of thinking using that process when I need it. So then you'd go and say, okay, we have our hero. The hero wants to do something. So I'm just going to give you this example in the script for Citizen Kane. All right. You're going to find out who's the hero. What does the hero want to do? And then work with the AI to have it write at least 20 paragraphs. Read them over, say, cut back on this, expand this. Just don't be lazy and just whatever it comes out to. Make sure you're happy with those 20 paragraphs. Then for each one, tell it to pick out the most important word based on what the hero wants to do for each sentence and have them listed. And then have them come up with custom definitions. Then ask it based on what the hero wants to do, what are the top 10 most important words? Then you as the human have to make the decision. What is the best, most important word? The definition is going to count hugely in this. Once you have that, that is going to be your base universal theme. Problem is, it's a broad brush.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's your problem. Now, what we have to do is we have to come up with something much more specific that matches what's in your mind. So what we then do is we tell it to take that base universal theme and come up with 100 synonyms with custom definitions. Then ask, compared to what the hero wants to do, what are the 10 best ones? And then you're going to go and look at those 10 and the custom definitions and pick the one that best matches what's in your head. And honestly, it's not going to be perfect. If you're not happy with it, that one that you just selected, that's your new universal theme. Well, go and run another 100 synonyms of it with custom definitions. Sometimes you have to go 5 or 6 times. Who cares? The AI is doing the grunt work for you. You can do this in under an hour. Then you find out the word that best represents what's in your head, the definition that really kind of, it's again, never be perfect, but it'll be close. Now you can use that as a lens to figure out what you want to do, where you want to go as a creative process.
That's interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just a different way of coming up with the creative process. But
Yes.
The reason that you go through these this process. What was your I guess your thesis? Like, why did you choose that way to do this? Is it something you found out by experimenting, or like why did you choose that?
Well, let's look at first of what the dyslexic mind is like. The front part of the brain is 2.5 times overactive. According to Yale, it deals with word analysis followed by articulation. So what I just gave you was a form of word analysis. Okay. What I found is if you ask a dyslexic in your speciality, in your area of extreme interest and ability, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed? Key question, but with little to no organization. The dyslexic is going to say yes. So we have to force the dyslexic brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. What do I mean by that? If you ask a gen ed person, what effect did Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech have on the American Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s? They know how to write a paper on that. It's big picture, eventually going down to details. For a dyslexic, it's like grabbing fog. We got to flip that script. We have to ask what personally compelled Martin Luther King to want to give his famous speech. That answer gives us a question, which gives us an answer, gives us a question, which forces the dyslexic brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. What does that really mean? We start off at a very specific point, and then we slowly go out. Question, answer, question, answer.
Because I guess the dyslexic mind sees a lot of noise.
It's complete chaos. There's no organization.
So because they see a lot of noise, they can't zero in.
They can't. There's just So that's how we fix that. Okay. So when I looked at that, then what I found is people have trouble trying to communicate without a universal theme.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that universal theme, we then need examples as a discussion. What I found is the problem that people have is once they come up with a universal theme, it's a broad brush.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the process of communicating with this? And I was like, well, who's the best communicator in English language history? And every professor almost had a unanimous decision, Shakespeare. I was like, oh, good grief. You're going to send me back to that hell? I did not like Shakespeare at school. I mean, as a dyslexic, This is my idea of hell. So then I went back. I was like, okay, what's the process? And I said, okay, here's the process. How do we simplify that? And that's what I found by when you look at the front part of the dyslexic brain, it deals initially with word analysis. And I found out if you don't know exactly what the word means, and I mean exactly, you can't use it. So literally when I work with the kids, they do all this manually. They literally look up each word, the definition, type it out all the time until they mastered it. Okay. But literally that's how they learn to read. So once you understand exactly what it is, then the next thing that you have to do is then, okay, now I have my universal theme. Now I can use that as a lens to then look through it. And I found out if you give that to, like ChatGPT 5.5 extended thinking, as a lens, it can start coming up with really interesting things. Then you can narrow that down, come up with a good example, and then you can start using that to create the message that you want to have. It gets you past the block.
Yeah, it's like the large language. Like just to give you disclosure, in my day job, I'm a software designer, engineer, business analyst. I've been doing software design since 1993. And
Wow.
I'm certified in a bunch of AI tech, but the large language models are very interesting. But what people need to understand about them, there's no sentience. They're just predictive, analytical, mathematical models. They understand things because they based on all the knowledge that they brought in through the large language model, they're predictive analytics. They predict what the next thing's going to be, but there's no real understanding of what that is. They just predict it based on what they learned. And if they haven't learned enough, their prediction might give you a hallucination.
Right. And here's the thing that drives me nuts about this hallucination stuff. Yeah, I created 3 auditing modes where I literally go before I send out a document, it's audited 17 to 25 times. Okay. I don't worry about hallucinations because I fix them that way. The purpose here was when you're in the creative process in this space is pardon my French, to hell with the hallucinations or even any concern about the damn hallucinations. Get it out there. Get what you're trying to say out there as best as you can using the artificial intelligence. Go back, compare it to the universal theme in your head and what you're trying to say, and tell it, that's not what I wanted. This is the changes that I want. Get me what I'm looking for. And then once you have that down, then you can take off your creative hat and then put on your editor hat and then go through and check all that stuff. Don't try to do that while you're in the creative mode. To hell with hallucinations and just full speed ahead. Get it out. Try to get it to be what you're trying to say. I found out if you try to do both at the same time, you end up with nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think that just people need to understand that prompt engineering is a craft. And I think some folks, like, they just do the first prompt and they take what they get on the first one.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of refining it.
Well, honestly, but going back and forth, this is you having a conversation with the AI.
Yeah.
And this is not where you want to worry about some fancy prompt.
Yeah.
You just want to say, this is what I'm looking for. This is not what I'm looking for. You want to get your idea. This is a lens to help you get your ideas.
Well, you got a specific use case. I mean, if you have a different type of use case, you might want more accuracy. For your use case, accuracy is not as important.
We want it doesn't matter what you're simply. This is the one thing that I keep running into, just so people know about my background with AI. I am one of those people that more than 10x the amount of work you'd expect an educated person to do. Okay, I'm actually around 13, 14 times right now. What you want to do in this case is get your ideas out. Get them generally organized the way you're looking for. If there's any freaking hallucinations, you can deal with that when you're when you take your creative hat off and you're on your editing hat. Okay. I see people, the most valuable thing you can do is to come out with that original idea. So let me give you an example. During the creative process, what we're trying to do is kind of like what the craft of research says with a problem statement. What's a problem that actually, if we solve it, will actually really give the reader something really to understand. So one of the biggest issues that I had is after I got done with my original program, when I presented it in New York City, I had two things happen. The first thing is that the senior professor said, we don't care about this. We want the craft of research. And they wanted me to teach literally that level of skill to high school dyslexics before they stepped into college. And they were serious about it. And they're still serious. The teachers asked me, this is great. Does this work for normal kids? And I said, no. And they said, come back when it does. So I had to come back with how to teach literally PhD level writing concepts to the young and to the kids, so it actually works. All right. So what I found is I didn't have the artificial intelligence back then. I had to do all this manually. What I initially did is I focused on articulation, followed by a little bit of word analysis. Because remember, it was the graduate records, analytical writing, analytical articulation. That was my insight. I found I had to flip it to word analysis first, followed by articulation. All right. That insight took me, and to set everything up, took me 8 years before I came back. Okay. So what this allows you to do is when you're looking as a creative process, this allows you to focus on just trying to rough your idea out. Don't worry about hallucinations. Don't worry about anything. As long as it generally makes sense, then you can take that document. I open up a new session with the artificial intelligence, and then I go into editing mode and it starts asking you questions. You can go back and forth. That's when you worry about this stuff, not in the creative process.
In the initial kind of like stream of consciousness kind of phase. Like when you're a musician, you can either write stuff down on the page, right down the bars, or you could be like a jazz fusion experimental artist and just put the tape player on record and just go free flow. and then later you go back and listen to the tape. You say, where's that catchy phrase? Like, where's the thing that's really going to be what's going to enthrall somebody, that's going to keep somebody in the song? Where's the hook? When you find it after, like, you got an hour worth of music, that you just riff stuff, and then you go and you focus. And it's kind of the editorial process that any creative person goes through. You're describing something that's a common process. I've talked to writers and film directors and all kinds of artists that create that initial free flow, kind of download from the universe, and then they go and refine it.
Right. Now I'm going to give you a bit of so you see how I showed you that first part. Okay. Let's say we wanted to extend that to writing, so you can see how this works. So you see how we came up with our universal theme. The next thing we would do is use that as a lens to come up with our ultimate villain. Okay. That would be, I start off with a person, a character, and then eventually move to concepts. I then take our hero, our universal theme, and our villain, turn it into a basic sentence. Then I go because, and now we're going to do an advanced form of articulation, just so you can see how this works. I would then come up with 3 really good reasons. For each reason, I would turn it into a simple universal theme, then go to the script of your movie, all right, Citizen Kane. And I would find an exact quote that deals with that simple universal theme at the beginning of the script and one at the end. I would put those 2 quotes together. That's now my data. And then from there, I would create the topic sentence. Now, have you ever noticed that when you're going from your topic sentence to your data, it doesn't flow very well? I would then use a warrant. I'd apply a warrant to this situation. Anybody outside of a PhD candidate generally doesn't know what a warrant is. It's directly from the book called The Craft of Research. It connects your topic sentence with your data by answering a how question and a why question. So I would do that. I would have our topic sentence, our how answer, our why answer, then the quotes. Now it flows well. Okay. So what I did there is that's how I applied word analysis followed by articulation. Remember that first part, the kids are doing all of that manually. They're not doing hundreds and hundreds of ones. They're doing a more limited number of synonyms, but they're typing out the word, they're typing out the definition that they're looking up every time. That's how they build over time a vocabulary of hundreds and hundreds of evolved words, usually over 6 to 12 months. And then that's how I just showed you how to do an advanced body paragraph in just a few moments. That's that solution. That's the solution. That's, basically from the Craft of Research. So what I just showed you here is how to start using universal themes, how to organize it, how to come up with something very specific, and then how to extend, all the way through articulation. You can adapt that to focus on anything you want to do in the creative process.
It's interesting because you've kind of, turned the process into a very scientific method, very structured, very logical brain.
Yes, because the issue when you're dealing with dyslexics is we have 2.5 times the neural activity, but it's all chaos. That forces the thought process that forces the brain to kind of organize itself. And that's the big issue with dyslexia. But I've also used that with other people, with Gen Ed people. So let's just take an example. Give me an example that you're running into that's an issue with a creative process, something you're trying to solve.
Well, the creative process, I'm very free flow. And I don't usually run into blocks. I've written over 5,000 songs. I write 2 or 3, 4 songs a day.
Okay.
So I don't run into that problem because I kind of allow myself to get a download from the universe, and I'm very experimental. And I'm not looking for perfection. Part of the problem, I think, with some folks is they're looking for perfection. I'm looking for the happy accident. I use a lot of analog synthesizers, and I let them give me the tone because they're kind of organic. When they warm up, they behave differently at 5 minutes on versus 30 minutes on. You have to rewire them manually to change their workflow. And every day I pull all the wires out and I remap them and just randomize it. And over time, after 10,000 hours of doing work, you've got some base knowledge. But when you hear something different, you don't let your logic brain tell you what to do. You go with the feeling. So my creative process, I don't have a problem because I kind of go with the flow state.
So you've already developed your process. So for just your community out there, what I just gave you is you don't want to take what I gave you and just run it verbatim. You want to adapt it to how you do things. I just want you to think of it this way. Once you come up with a very specific universal theme that best represents what's in your head, and then you use that as a lens. You tend not to need to pick out the ultimate villain unless you're trying to create a story, but just trying to come up with some ideas on that. Use that as a lens and try to come up with an example. So most people, if you tell them what the universal theme is and you give them a simple example that makes sense, they can get it. You don't have those two things. You can't explain it into a one-word universal theme, and you can't give an easy example. It makes trying to communicate your message really hard. And with just the advent of so much AI slop out there that people are dumping on the internet, this is how you cut through that message. Let me give you an example.
Noise. Yeah.
We met on Podmatch. I started Podmatch in March of last year in 2025. This is now my 280-something podcast. Okay. I was the number one guest on Podmatch for month after month after month. Now I'm number 8 or something out of so many thousands of people. I use my method of how to come up with something interesting to say that I can apply to pretty much just about anything to help spread what I'm trying to say across the internet. I had to look at, you could do the traditional social media thing where you try to find that one thing which really is kind of ridiculous that goes viral, or you can just do the plotting podcast after podcast after podcast thing. What I found out after doing this 280 some odd times is the reviews that I'm at number 252. So I'm hitting about 88, 89% of podcasters leave me a good review and a good comment. And people are starting to notice, like, oh yeah, I heard you on that podcast. Because they heard me on a podcast that they trusted, my reach isn't anywhere near as broad, but it's much deeper when I make that connection because they've heard me on a podcast.
More relevant. Yeah.
So when you're looking, when I'm I'm using the creative process to go on shows that people are like, you solve dyslexia. I said, yes, but I also go on wine tasting shows. I go on AI shows. I go on marketing shows because the craft of research shows you how to solve everything. And I combined, the overactive front part of the dyslexic brain with the craft of research. That was my insight. And then I'm just out there explaining it. Okay. So once you come up with your solution, you don't have to come up with a million solutions all the time. You need to find one good one. And then believe me, there's no end how you go out and repeat it. Get your book out there, get your YouTube out there, get on the podcast, go and explain things, get on the speaking stage.
Well, I think it's really interesting because I've been podcasting since 2016. I've done over 1,300 episodes. And initially, I only interviewed musicians. Then I decided, what's the common thing with the music? Well, they're creatives. Then I opened it up to authors, poets, painters. Then when I got into Podmatch in 2020, I said, you know what? There's a lot of influencers. There's a lot of authors. There's a lot of, people who are like just coming up therapists, but they're creative. They're entrepreneurs. They're creative. So what's the common theme? Creativity. And then I still try to wind in the creative process that comes from like typical creators, like songwriters, musicians, film directors, painters, but apply that across the board. And I've been able to kind of thread the needle, be able to not just have a podcast that's just talking to singer-songwriters. I can talk to anybody because most human beings are creative in some way.
Oh yeah, especially songwriters, creators, researchers. That is those are creative jobs, and I can tell you that being dyslexic is a huge advantage in all of these. Huge.
Yeah.
So the main issue that we've run into is we couldn't communicate it in writing, but now using AI with a
No, you
lot, as
can't.
I said, when I'm using artificial intelligence, I created 3 modes with Anthropic. Okay,
Hmm.
I use Opus currently 4.8 on max setting. Um, I have what I call a catastrophic mode. I literally have it look through the document and say, what have we left out that catastrophically hurts this that we need to add? And I'll
Hmm.
run that mode literally like 10, 12 times until it literally comes back with 0.
You
Then I have
refine
one
it.
called,
Yeah.
called max correction mode. How can we maximize anything else that needs to be corrected? I'll run that 5, 6 times. And then I have a full polish mode one. And until it comes back with 0 with all of those, I I just
Yeah.
keep running it.
Well, you're
And I
using like an agile iterative method, which is like in software development. That's what we do when we design software.
Yeah. So just by doing that, I was at 85%. Now I'm with the new model. I'm pushing about 90%
Hmm.
of published ready. So when I send that out to a senior human to re-go over things, of course they check everything,
Yeah.
and they hardly ever find an hallucination or anything else. They make some small changes, and then I ship it out. But when I send it to my assistant, one's a PhD candidate, one has a master's in teaching English, they said the work is really well done. But if I didn't go through those modes and the
Iterative
200 plus
process. Yeah.
corrections, it's AI slop.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. Like, the reason you see the AI slop is AI is so convincing on the first answer that if you don't really know your topic, which is the problem with a lot of people building the prompts, they don't really know the topic. So when it gives them the slop, they don't know that it is slop because they haven't done
And,
the work.
well, yeah. So what you need to focus on, this is what I found out when people are scared about AI taking their job. You need to know your subject cold. You need to know what good looks like, and when it's not good, you need to know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Because the AI is a really smart, dumb thing. Okay, it
Yeah.
doesn't understand the basics. And if you're a kid coming out of college, I'm 52, you're 22, you're a kid, right? What I would do is run a deep research report on anything. Usually, I
Anything.
have
Yeah.
Anthropic Opus do it. Usually about 3,500 to 4,000 words. Read the report and then use that as something to go to model what you're going against. And over 6 to 12 months, you do this with everything, you're going to be able to become relatively senior that quickly and have a good idea of what good looks like and what, if it's not, how to fix it. Because
But
until you
you're
do that,
yeah.
your usefulness to the organization is rather limited.
So that's the kind of basic skills. Like if you go and get your BA and then you go get your master's, like you go to like the rigor of like the academic like ideology or method. You have to test and verify. Like if you're like if we're building programs in software, I design programs for banks and insurance companies. We've got like that tens of thousands of lines of code, and we have to know what the business case is. Say we're doing cost
Mhm.
of insurance, we're doing underwriting. We have to go and understand what is the business case, what is the use case, what's the end result, what's the expected result, what are we trying to do, right? If you don't understand the base case, how are you going to design anything? You can't understand. You have to understand the business terminology of what the banker wants to do, what their insurance actuary wants to do. If you have no idea and you just try to match a number on a spreadsheet without knowing what does that number represent, you're just going to fail every time.
Yeah, that's why I said when you're new, right out of college, right out of grad school, run those deep research reports. And it's 6, 12 months, 18 months until you know what it is. And then I don't care how advanced AI is going to get. We're just going up the food chain. Again, you have to know your subject cold, and then when it's not right and how to make it right. And then you can learn how to teach the AI to do what you need to do. Like literally, I am just moving over to 4.8 Opus and I set everything on max. This just dropped a couple of days ago. And I had all these projects that I couldn't get cowork to do correctly. Now it's doing it correctly. All right. And it's just allowing me to go and once I get a few things run and set up, I'll be able to be so much more successful for so much less time.
Well, yeah, this is more efficient because like now you get the busy work or the grunt work out of the way, and then you can go to the critical thinking, the creative thinking. And the problem I have is like a lot of the American educational system was built on building the industrial worker for the assembly line or the farm worker for the field. And if you don't, and when you didn't really want 80% of the class to become critical thinkers, you didn't want them to be W. Du Bois, you didn't want them to be somebody who got Carnegie Mellon being an engineer, you just wanted them sitting in a cube. Like, how do you go from overnight, get rid of all the grunt work, to getting people to have critical thinking when you didn't really teach them how to critically think?
That is the transition people are going to have to make. And what I'm just telling people is Anthropic went from doing 9 billion last year. Their annual run rate now is at 47 billion. They're probably going to double, 10x again this year to 90 billion. You wonder why Wall Street's making all this profit? It's just going to keep going crazy like that. And either you're going to be on the train or off. And that's why I tell people when they think, well, I have parents that are like this all the time. They're like, what happens if my kid does, I don't like AI, I don't want him, I think it's the devil. I said, fine. They can deal with it when they're 18. Parents said, okay. I show them the craft of research. And I've had students who freaking hate AI, hate it all through college, never use it. They go to a company, they force them to use it. Within a matter of weeks, they're teaching their peers how to do AI. Because I said, go do your context, then go to your problem statement, then go to your solution. And they say, I hate this. I said, welcome to the adult world. But I showed them how to practice this. They practice all through high school and college. And then they apply that to where their companies are. And they're like, they're coming back with solutions that the company can actually use. And then they're told to teach their peers. And the peers don't know anything about context problem solution. So they have to teach them that.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm teaching them what I did in high school.
Well, everybody has to go back to school. And that's the problem because there's some folks that don't like going to school. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem, the issue is going to be is there are folks that don't want to have that critical thinking as part of their life. But in order to win in the next 10 years or even 5 years, like you're going to lose your position if you're not willing to go into that like, what can you creatively do, right? Instead of waiting for the boss to give you the task. In my shop, I'm working for a startup. AI is part of our performance assessment. We have to prove not that we're just using it to show that we're using it, that how many hours we used it. We have to show that have we come up with a new idea that's going to push the needle forward? Are we going to come up with a new process, a new procedure, a new product, because we are using it as a tool to assist us to be able to do things that maybe we couldn't afford to do, that we can, instead of going to Mumbai and using 10 resources in India to do something manually, that I automate a process and I do it faster than those 10 people could do, and more efficient than those 10 people can do, more accurate than those 10 people could do.
Yes, but here's the thing: when you're an employee, don't expect to do all this productive work for the same salary you were making 5 years ago.
Well, I know.
Okay, I've literally had people that I've trained, and then they go out and they're literally they became one of those 10Xers, and they're going out asking for, they don't want 100,000, they want 200 plus, and they're getting it. If one company won't pay, another one will.
Yeah. But you have to, basically you're creating like a talent, you're creating this like resource that you're going to be able to sell, and you should get top dollar. You shouldn't let, this is the problem. A lot of folks want to feel comfortable because they're mortgaged and they want to stay in a job 5 years, 7 years. But in this market, doing that is going to bite you. Because if you
Oh,
do that and you're locked at 150 and you could be making 250, but you're too scared to go do that because you would just want to, what you know, right? You're comfortable in that structure showing up at that cube. That's not going to work because guess what? Eventually, they're probably going to kick you out. So you might as well go.
if you can do that level of work, and I have had people that I've advised on that. One was interesting. She was making about 120,000. Then she went and she got up to 275, and she was putting in less hours.
Oh yeah, you will put
because
less
she wanted
hours
to be home with her kids early for certain things, but she was so damn productive. She said, "Here's exactly what she said." She said, "Let's look at what your previous person did. Let's look what I do over the next 3 months." And it came back. She was multiple times more effective. She's like, you can hit my numbers, or I can go to somebody else and they'll get it because guess what? Thanks for showing me the data that I can now show them. She got what she was looking for.
Yeah. Well, I've always been able to get increases, and I'm in a startup. So in a startup, like you usually get rewarded if you can prove to the CIO and the founders that you're doing it. And because you can actually go in the door and you have to go through layers. I can just go talk to the founders and just call them on the phone. I can call them on the phone like right now. And so when you're in an organization that's like that, which I used to work for the Fortune 500 and I got tired of it because there are too many layers of bureaucracy. I went to work for smaller companies that were more dynamic. And the more dynamic companies were willing to let me have the architect hat on, have the analyst hat on, have the sales hat on. If I need to go to a sales call with the CIO, boom, I can go with them, right? And you just have these opportunities because you're not being put a glass ceiling on what you can do. You're being allowed to totally be dynamic. It's like the Silicon Valley idea, but not everything's in Silicon Valley. My guys are out of Louisiana. But you can just do whatever you want if you're willing to do it.
And if you're a head and hands person, here's my recommendation: become an electrician. I've had students who went and did that. They're excellent at it. And I just had one of my former students. He finished up. He had his associate's degree in electrician, and then he did a 5-year union apprenticeship. So he's a full journeyman guy. And they said they want him to build a data center in some.
Oh yeah, a lot of work for people doing that. Plumbers too.
Yeah, but specifically electricians in the middle of nowhere. So he found out what they were offering, and he said, "Yeah, I'm 50% more expensive." The guy said, "No way." He kicked it up anyway. Came back from the site. Is this guy real? Does he know? Yeah, fully qualified. Pay him. Get him out here.
Mm-hmm. The plumbers there's a lot of work for those data centers getting built. You got plumbers and engineers, and
it's billions of dollars, billions and billions. I don't know. It's maybe over 10 billion. They're not going to. The guy's like, I need the skilled labor so bad. Get him out here. And then when he showed up, he negotiated. Here's his overtime rate.
and all that stuff you're building. There's still going to be
trailer with a bunch of guys. He said it sucks, but he's making so much money. He's going to be able to put down he's going to stay there until he can save up half for a house.
Well, the thing is, even after you build the infrastructure, it has to get the GPUs have to get replaced in 5 years, and then the plumbing and all the electricity, that stuff's going to probably crap out. So there's going to be lots of maintenance.
Yes.
And so the maintenance work on these things is going to create a whole level of people. And then all the entrepreneurs building new technologies and services from this is going to create the new economy. Because now you can go and become a micro industrial powerhouse with 2 guys, 3 guys, with 3 ladies. It's you don't hardly need anybody. You might need 100 people. You can do it with 2 people. You could have 1,000 people. You could do it with 2 people. It's so that's where there's no limitation. If you're still thinking old world, of course, if you're in the old paradigm, you're going to think everything's terrible. But you can't live in that world because that world doesn't exist. We're where we are.
Yep. So,
but I do have to kind of cut it close because I do have another podcast coming up. I do want to let people know we have the QR code for your ebook link. And if people scan that, they go right to your website that I have up there, but that's easier to just QR code it. So if people go there, they can get your book.
Yeah. They can get the 3 Reasons book. Best thing to do is just click on where it says download free guide, fill out 3 questions, and contact me directly. And I'll see what I can do to help you get through this.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today. Sorry to cut it off. I do a lot of live shows today.
Oh, no. That's absolutely fine. You got another one coming up soon.
Okay, but thank you for being here. I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and we've been able to apply like what you're doing to a lot of people's lives that maybe didn't even realize they needed assistance. And so I hope people check this out, scan the QR code, dive into it, and I hope we can talk to you again in the future when you have another book or another like session to talk about things. But thank you.
That'll be great. Thank you.